Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. I'm going to start off the show not with football this week, but with Major League Soccer, because I haven't seen this get a lot of press. I honestly didn't even know that Major League Soccer had been in talks to start back up. Down here in North Carolina, there's the National Women's Soccer League, I believe is what it's called. I could have the acronym mixed up, but their big powerhouse is down here in Carolina. I think they just got upset, actually, and they've been playing games without fans. So they keep talking about all these other sports like, oh, the NFL is never going to play and all this stuff. Soccer's playing. It's an outdoor sport. You're going to have contact. I mean, we always see it. They compare concussions in soccer to concussions in football. I mean, it's not as direct, but there are times where you're heading the ball coming at you who knows how many miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. Like, that is not, I mean, I'm just playing around in the schoolyard. I've gotten hit with the soccer ball in the head, and I've been shook up more than on a football field. So I know that could be a real thing. But you can't tell me that random soccer leagues across Europe and across the United States, Matt, are able to play, but then I can't watch football this year. I get the college one, because that's a different beast. Those guys aren't paid. But give me my Steelers. You can have them play. But the reason I really brought this up, they're starting their season with a brand new tournament, which is exactly what I've been talking about for the NBA. Why not just start with the tournament? Because then you can cut down your teams and really go ahead with like the pod system. Major League Baseball should have did this 100%. They could have been started right now. There's no reason Major League Soccer can get this going and Major League Baseball cannot. Major League Baseball, you don't even have as much contact as you do in soccer. Like, there's guys up on each other trying to steal the ball, rubbing elbows. You don't have that in baseball unless you're getting tagged. But even then, it's like, okay, not a big deal. But they're doing group stages. Let me see what the round is. So they're having a 4-round tournament. The first round, is it 16 teams? I'm not sure how many teams are in here. I think it's 16. So you're doing your group stage. So just like I talked about, which even college football could do if they really wanted to, you're playing in a regional. They're doing double headers. So it runs from July 25th through July 28th. And that's really going to be the Brown. I don't even know if they're having a play-in, but they've been playing some games now. I don't know if it's preseason or if it's part of this or not. But their website says that they're doing it July 25th. So it should be coming up. They're doing double headers, and then from there, you'll have your group stage, and whatever teams move on, then you'll have the actual tournament. So immediately, you're cutting your league in half for the tournament. You don't have to worry about 8 teams getting sick. So when baseball and all of them are talking about it, it's like you could just have 4 teams, or like even the NHL, they're in the playoff stage. You're letting all these other teams in. Just do all of them in different pods and places where there's not a big outbreak, or you can control it like the NBA is doing in Orlando. Then they get into their quarterfinals or doubleheaders on July 30th and August 1st. Then they have the semifinals August 5th and 6th. Then they have a final. Now, this tournament, they're giving a brand new trophy and stuff, and it's going to count, just like I said, teams should do. Why not have more tournaments and things? Like, there's no rule that says your league can only have one champion a year. That's just like a random thing that they've been doing based on travel that's, let's be honest, 100 years old. Like, when these sports and their rules came in for regular season stuff, people were traveling by train. Baseball players would literally hop a train, and that's how they would get to the next city. And that's how they chose where franchises could be. That's why there weren't a lot of franchises in the South. The trains ran from New York, Philly, west to Chicago. So that's where all the teams spread out from. And the soccer thing, I like it. And they added an extra twist, because if this goes well, then these games are going to count towards their regular season schedule or whatever. And then it's right back into it for the actual cup. So the NBA has been toying around with doing a holiday tournament. Why not lock in a playoff spot or something, like an automatic playoff berth if you win that tournament on Christmas? I mean, you could even split up and do an East-West if you wanted to. I think that would be a cool idea that would really take it to the next level that I haven't thought about. So I know a lot of people don't like soccer, and if you turn the show off, hopefully we'll hear back from you next week. But man, this is a good idea. I'm glad that someone like that came out and they were able to come up with a plan to get sports back. And if there are no other sports, if they all get pushed back, you can at least watch soccer. And like I said, their plan was they do the tournament. If the virus kicks up and everything else has to be canceled, they at least have a champion for this year. So there's zero reason why baseball couldn't have followed the same game plan. And I don't even know if they're having fans in the stands or whatever, but that's the tournament. Matt, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I like the idea that they're having the tournament and they're kicking it off and they're getting back, because we needed some professional sports team to get out and at least lay the groundwork for what the plan or how to handle it. We're waiting to see here for next week with baseball kicking back off, but it's like this is what we needed. We needed some sport to put a toe in the water, because the more that people are getting out and they're doing different stuff, as long as they're not, as long as they're following the social distancing guidelines, I don't see what the issue is. And it kind of goes back to some of the stuff we talked about last week. The biggest thing that I look at is if you don't feel safe and you don't want to participate, who's making you play? From low level peewees all the way up to the professional athletes. If a professional athlete opts out, maybe he opts out of his contract, or like he's not going to get paid for the time that he's off, but no one's saying that you have to not participate. I think that a lot of this is they just have to get out and quit being so worried about this. And if you're following the social distancing guidelines and you're doing the things that you need and everyone's taking the precautions, you're seeing a lot of teams. And I think more with the reports that are coming out of college, with the exception of Miami, the majority of the programs that I've seen, they're getting back. They're in their team bubble, and they're fine. They may be returning to campus and testing positive as their first returning, but once they get into that facility, they're going to be locked down. They're locked down with trainers. They're locked down with their nutritionalists. They're locked down within the coaches and the team. Like, they're not going to be around a lot of other people that's going to expose them to the virus if they haven't already gotten it. So to me, I want to just keep going with it. I mean, one of the things that annoys me, though, is that they're talking about putting up these cardboard cutouts for Major League Baseball, or like for some of these professional sports. It's like, why waste that time? How about you save that money and give the money that you're investing in cardboard cutouts to paying some of the staff that would end up being cut as a result of the quarantine and the pandemic and different stuff. It's like you're going to waste money on giving the illusion that fans are there. And I think you brought up before, it's something that you could even just digitally put the fans in there if you wanted to put it in for televising purposes to give it the illusion that people were there. I don't know that it's that big of a deal, but I do want to get it back, and I think the people should have the choice to be able to do that, because I know I'm ready to be back. I want to have a season. I don't want it delayed like I know a lot of states are, and fortunately in Pennsylvania we're at a point right now where it's not, our season hasn't been taken away from us. So I'm fingers crossed that we continue on that trajectory.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about the fans in the stands, because there's a lot of politicking going on right now in sports, and I think they just need to focus on getting the games back. And like I saw, was it the NFL? Actually, Mark Davis, because I texted it to you, Matt. There's a guy, awful haircut. Like, whoever makes that decision, it's just an awful one. Like, at some point, someone has to tell him, like, wow, that looks bad. Unless he's cutting it himself. No, here's what I thought. He's cutting it himself. And then you realize the first cut, you're like, oh, my bangs aren't even. Let me just even them up. And then by the time you're done, you're all the way up here and you're like, oh, man, not again. Because That's the only way you could leave the house like that. That's the only thing I could think of. But his idea, he wanted a glass ring put around the stadium so that he could start getting more people into the stands. And what the NFL was proposing instead was that you had to leave the first 8 rows empty, because that way the players would be further distance from the fans. If they're yelling, they were looking at, like, I guess, germ spread. If someone's yelling, how far could it travel? And you push them back 8 rows. And then they even talked about putting advertisements in, which, to your cardboard cutout thing, that's dumb. If they can't have fans, I would rather see them put ads in the stands as a way to try to keep more people on staff. Because like you said, otherwise they're just going to lay these people off or fire them. Like, why not get more concession stands, spread them out, try to keep lines down and things like that. Or if they're doing like waiting services or whatever. I mean, I don't know what the finalized plan is, but do the ads if it helps you keep those people there and help the players keep their salary. Because some of those younger guys, like we talked about it, some of them in the NFL, you barely make a couple $100,000 and you only play for 2 or 3 years, if that, on average. And then that's it. If you didn't finish college, you're kind of stuck. Like, that's not enough to live your entire life on. So if you put so much time and effort into it, I'd rather see these guys, especially like baseball too. You really don't last that long, and you're playing in the minors. You're barely making what a guy working at like a gas station would make. In some cases for minor league, some of them even have to have regular jobs. So I'd rather see them get paid than to just be like, you know what? We're not. So I'm all for just throw the ads in if someone wants to do it. It's better than putting them on the jerseys. So there's that one. The NBA was doing the plexiglass version. I don't know if you saw this, but they unveiled their court. And what they did was they put the glass all the way around it. And then they had, it looked like the seats that would have been down by the court. Like if you ever watched college basketball tournament, when they get to those bigger venues, usually the band and the student section's like down on the floor. It looked like they just had foldable chairs spaced pretty far apart. I did see a thing where they said that the glass, they might project like cheering things on. Like, you know how if you're at a basketball game or whatever, they have the Jumbotron and it tells you to get loud, which I thought would be obnoxious if they put that on TV, especially if there's only like a couple hundred fans and I don't know who they're letting in down in Orlando. But I thought, just play the games. Like, why are you trying to think through all of these crazy scenarios and trying to get the fans into the game? People just want to watch. It's not like they're going to be there. And if they're actually at the game, hopefully they understand basketball enough to know when to cheer. It's not just like a casual guy's like, you know what, I'm going to go to a basketball game today and jump through all those hoops just to get in. You're probably only going to get diehard fans this year. But
I do think as far as the player safety is concerned, I think that it makes sense for them to try to give that additional spacing as far as moving stuff around and limiting how much access you have to the players, because I think that would help with maintaining whatever bubble. And I think, like, when you look at some of these different athletes, you know, they're in a really restrictive environment to begin with, so they're probably safer there than they would be staying at home or being in whatever cities that they were holed up in during the pandemic anyhow. You know, I think the owners have a vested interest in maintaining safe conditions for their players and keeping them performing at a high level.
Well, that's why I kept saying for hockey, like the Penguins, they had all these people come back positive. Why not put it in the Midwest, like the deep Midwest, like they were talking about the Dakotas, because they have a bunch of hockey arenas there to go with like a very successful college program. Like, why not? I know testing might have been hard at first, but like in June or July, they could have easily had all the players come out, test, quarantine somewhere out there on their own, like it's a hotel or whatever. I'm sure they didn't have a lot of lodging, but you could have done it. and then let the teams practice those first 2 weeks while you had the initial quarantine, and then start right back up. Like at this point, you've wasted how many weeks, and you could have been in a place where there wasn't a lot of spread at all and really tried to get ahead of it and been that pioneering sport and try to get something out there. But now, like I said all along, you have all these leagues that are coming back at the exact same time now. And people are probably, if you've tuned out, what's going to make you tune back into sports? Like you're used to, I know there's not a lot of stuff you can go out and do or whatever, you're stuck at home, but honestly, once you've kind of given it up and you're looking at like in the fall, you're like, oh, normally every weekend I'm watching football. And it's like, if they don't have it, what's going to bring me back next year if I get used to just not having it and like going camping or something else? Like pick up some new hobbies, and then you might lose fans for good. So it's another thing to think about for the NFL as they're trying to navigate this. At some point, like you said, try to do whatever to make players sure that they're safe. You're doing the testing and everything that you can, but you got to try to get it back to normal at some point. If you push it back to spring, then it's going to be even more crowded. And what are these other leagues going to do? That's why I keep thinking, like, basketball, they keep putting all this focus on the regular season stuff. You might not get past 2 weeks before it starts to have an outbreak. Then you have to shut the entire thing down, and then what? You're back doing regular season games? Just go right to playoffs. Like, who you trying to kid? So, go back and listen to our old episode. I went through about how most of their teams in the playoff hunt had losing records, so you could have just cut them out and said tough luck. What else do I have for the NFL? Steelers signed Alex Highsmith, their first draft pick, and I think that they're running out of money. They haven't signed anyone else. What round was he taken? And he was in the middle round, I believe.
Well, hey, they didn't restructure Ben's contract yet, so give him time.
That's very true. I think they're at $5 million left, somewhere around that range, and you have to sign, 6 guys? But with the NFL, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, the preseason, we've been talking about it. I kept saying, cancel it. Looks like that's going to happen. The NFL and the NFLPA, they've gotten together and kind of said, hey, we're going to go ahead and cut this out so that we can just get right into the regular season. Like, why play around with preseason games if people might have a chance of getting sick? Like I've been saying the entire time. Just cut it down and see what happens. But it's better than doing preseason and then shutting the entire thing down without having any meaningful games.
But the other part to that is where we were kind of talking in the past about how if someone gets infected, you could be running down with a shortened number of people. It looks like they're going to possibly try to open it with 80 players to start the year with, as opposed to the pared down 53. So if you're carrying that many extra guys on the roster, then if they're just going to jump right into the regular season, that may actually help out in terms of having more players on the team to be able to develop and bring along with them. So I think that may be something too that's going to work out as a positive, that they get rid of the preseason games and they're still able to hold on to a couple extra players, so that if players are injured or do contract coronavirus, it's not going to completely crush, a team or a conference.
But was that 80 people like actual travel people? Because I was wondering if they were actually cutting it down and that was part of their practice squad. Like they were limiting numbers, and then you're losing opportunities.
I mean, I think in the end it's going to end up losing opportunities. But I mean, if they're going to start off with just that total number being that much higher at the start of the year, even if they're giving it time to pare it down, it's still going to work out for a lot of these guys to be able to at least have the opportunity to get on with a team or to catch someone's attention, so that as injuries and different things come up, that they can have an opportunity to catch on somewhere else.
Yeah, because I know that changes. I'm trying to look it up, but so it looks like it might be more. So they can have 10 players on the practice squad, so that is giving them a good bit more. than what they normally have to play around with. And like, I don't know how many are going to be active during the game, if it's going to be the full 80 or not, because we really haven't seen a solid answer yet. But they're probably figuring it out. So you have that come out, and that's going to be the big thing with the NFL. No preseason games, different team sizes. They're letting each team dictate their own stadium policy. And so I think it was the New York governor or mayor, one of them came out and said that they're not having fans in their stands. So like the Giants, they're out.
Well, what else is new? Both Giants and Jets suck anyway. So what's it matter?
Well, the Jets, it won't matter. They're in Jersey, aren't they?
And Jersey's governor just said they're opening back up for sports. So bully to them.
Well, Rutgers, they announced that they're not going to have fans if they have, which is a step up. I've been hearing that they're not even going to play. So, I mean, they must have saw the dollar signs. I saw a thing, it was like, which Big Ten teams would be hurt the most with the canceled season. You had your big dogs at the top, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. At the very bottom, it was like Rutgers. Didn't matter. Didn't matter if sports were canceled, because they're used to playing on the low budget anyway. So you get that Big Ten money in a year, it's like going to bump you back up. Like I'm sure that they've been paying for new facilities and things and trying to catch up, but they weren't even getting their full Big Ten pay yet. I forget what year that even ends. Same with like Nebraska or maybe Maryland. Like they all took an advance on the money. That's how poor their other conferences were. So like you get the money and they're like, oh good, we can pay off some debts. But then I've seen fans complain like, well, now it's not fair because we don't have the same amount of money as everyone else. Like you took the loan because you were so far behind in the first place. And you're still getting destroyed in every game. Like those were home games for Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. If you ever watched those games at Rutgers, it was full of the other team. I mean, maybe Ohio State you couldn't tell because they were the same colors, but you could see the Michigan and Penn State crowds. So I'm sure they're not the only ones either, but those are the three that always stuck out to me every time I saw them play at Rutgers. I'm like, this isn't going to be a game. It's like almost a home game for the other team. So, looking back at that MLS thing to wrap that up. So they are doing the group stage now. I guess there's 24 teams in MLS now. I wasn't sure how many they expanded to and if teams started. So they've been doing like the pod system already, where you're in your little group and they count for the regular season, and then they're going to pare down to 16 and then just get right into the rest of the playoffs. So they're cutting out what it would be 8 off the bat, and then you're going to cut that in half every other weekend. Or every weekend you just keep cutting it down, and then see how it goes. Hopefully it goes smooth for them and they can keep playing. I just wish they would have had an expansion team closer to me instead of keeping everything down. I mean, who's the closest team? DC United? I would never cheer for a Philadelphia team. I know you cheer for the 76ers, Matt, but I could never do that. So they're off my list. DC it is. I actually met those guys once. They're a pretty cool team. Probably none of the players are probably still on the team. But I hung out with them once at a concert. So let's see what else we have. Terrell Owens, dude. He ran a 4.4 against Tyreek Hill. My man.
Sign him.
You talk about staying in shape. And all the people that said, like, oh, no, he couldn't play. He's too old. It's honestly a locker room issue. Same with, like, Ocho Cinco. There's no reason for teams not to want to sign him. He can outplay, I would say, a bunch of receivers in the league. You can't tell me, and maybe it's a money issue, because I do know that some of the contracts are structured. Like, even with Cam Newton, after a certain level, you have to make so much money. And I mean, looking at it, there's no way Terrell Owens couldn't be a starting wide receiver for the Steelers. Like, he would at least fit in their top 3. And maybe even if he was wide receiver 3, you're not going to look at that and be like, oh, you know what? But maybe with his veteran salary, it's just not worth it. Which is another way it screws the players. Because at what age are you going to be like almost 40 in your late 30s, and then have a league come back and tell you, oh yeah, you can't sign this $1 million contract. Like, it's only $1 million. You definitely don't need that. They have to sign you for at least 12. You're worth 12. And then you're like, well, no one else is signing me for that. I just want to take the $1 million and I just want to play it. And the league's like, no, that's not how it works, sir. You have to stay at home. Because that's what I was worried was going to happen to Cam Newton. I didn't know what his salary was. I think it's a lot less than what I thought. I think it was like only a couple million. Because of some of those guys, you get locked in, it's like no one's going to touch them. And that's why a lot of veterans disappear. Once you hit like the Pro Bowl status or whatever, and you get those bonuses built in, they have to pay you that rate. That's why you have career backup guys. Teams are able to sign them for cheap, knowing that they don't have to pay the high rates. That's why a lot of vet starting quarterbacks never turn into backups. It's all a salary thing. So I'm sure Owens got squeezed out for that reason. No one's going to pay, but I'm telling you, he could at least be a wide receiver 3 on almost every team in the league.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And he maintained, Tyreek Hill gave him a 10-yard head start, and he maintained the edge almost the whole time.
Yeah, because he's awesome. I love T.O. And I wish he would have won a Super Bowl. I'm glad he didn't win it with the Eagles, but he could have got it somewhere else. I mean, man, same with Ochocinco. Like, if T.O. would have went to the Patriots, dude, that's what I think should have happened. Him and Ochocinco and Tom Brady, that would have been a killer squad. He ended up in Dallas. Dallas is always a bad move. So, I don't know. Let's see what else I have on here. Oh, Major League Baseball. Going back to them, I think we've talked about them playing. The city of Toronto told the Blue Jays, no, you're not playing. We don't want people coming in from the United States. And so the Blue Jays do not have a stadium. So they're stuck without having anything. And now they have been asking other teams, Pittsburgh being one of them, if they can play at their stadium. And like you were asking, Matt, before the show, as we're going through our notes, I think whenever they play there, the cut's not going to go to the Toronto's owner. I think they're going to have to pay or at least split that money with the host city. Like Pittsburgh will be paying. And to be honest, I hope it is Pittsburgh, because that's giving people that might only had seasonal jobs. Now you might be able to fill a decent schedule to try to get back into work. And I know that they said that he really was looking at that city. Like, why not? I don't know if they'd be any better than the Pirates, but give it a run.
I thought you were going to say it's going to help give Bob Nutting some more money. He'll have 2 teams there playing in his stadium and be cashing that extra check.
He probably will get a cut. I don't think he'll get the entire thing.
And then he can not sign more prospects for Pittsburgh.
He'll say,
it's the best of both.
You know what, guys? I had to split that money. Toronto took some of that.
I had to pay all those extra workers.
Hey, if you're going to bring it back, it's a great stadium. Why not have 2 teams playing it? And maybe so fans will actually get to see some good baseball. Instead of depressing, like, what's it, a shortened season, 60 games? Just think, instead of being out of it after 80, you're out of it after 20, 30 games.
And they're already going to kick the year off with a couple losses because they open with St. Louis, I believe.
You don't even have to,
like, just
Matt, once you're there, that's it. Like, you can check right out. Instead of like being invested for like 3 months thinking, holy crap, could they make a trade and make this work? You're like 2 weeks in, you're like, oh, it's over. Like, oh, perfect. Just in time for the weather to start to cool down. I can start doing some outside work. Like, what else am I doing? But, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that it'd be weird to have 2 teams in the same city like that, sharing a stadium?
Under normal circumstances, I think it would. But because we're so starved of professional sports right now, that as long as we were getting the coverage, I don't think that it would matter. As long as they're able to broadcast the games and they're not going to get blacked out because the Blue Jays are playing in Pittsburgh, I don't mind it. And if it's going to restrict some of the travel, it's going to keep players somewhat closer, then that's just another thing that makes sense, and it's a win-win type deal.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, I like to see more teams get that chance to just play. And if they have to share a stadium, so be it. I was worried that they were all going to be in certain pods and cities wouldn't even have that stuff. But they are letting hockey play up there. So Canada is letting some teams go. They must just not want too many teams going back and forth.
They just think baseball stinks. Their baseball teams haven't been good since the early 90s. They're like, well, we're just going to kick the can on this.
Probably true. Let's see what else. I know we've been trying to keep it shorter, but it's not really a lot of other stuff going on. Waiting to see what happens in terms of leagues starting back up. Like I said, if you're looking for sports, definitely check out Major League Soccer. They have some games going on right now. And it's on ESPN too. So ESPN's covering some of them. I wonder if it was on the ESPN Plus, because I thought that they had a bunch of that there. And I meant to check it out. Because where did I see it? I saw it streaming somewhere. And I caught a little bit of the game and I was pumped up about it. But that's actually how I noticed it, that it was back. But I did see a couple of like the NBA stuff's getting moved around. And since they've been pushing the season back, some college players are opting to go back to their teams, which I told you is probably a great idea. If you're a senior, or like let's say you just finished your junior year, didn't even get to finish it, you declared for the NBA draft, they postponed it. Like, what are your real options? Like, you're going to go to the draft, you might have been slated as a second round pick, you haven't been able to get your workouts in, you haven't been able to do your showcases or anything, and you're going to go to a late draft, and then if you don't get drafted, then what? You're screwed. You can't go back to the NCAA. You might be stuck in the G League while the G League is paying out all of these high school players. That's less roster spots for people right out of college. And so they've already picked up, 4 or 5 top recruits? They're going straight to the G League?
Yep.
It makes sense to go back, get your degree. A lot of colleges are going online anyway. So it's not like you have to invest a lot of like on-campus time. You can watch your lectures. Hell, you could even listen to them while working out in the gym. It's not like the professor's going to record you seeing where you watched them. I mean, I used to just put mine on while I was eating dinner or doing whatever when I had online lectures. So, like, why not? Go to the gym, shoot around, listen to your lecture. You can even listen to it multiple times because at least you have that recorded. On a regular class, you wouldn't have that luxury unless the professor was offering it. So, could be a good way to go back and get your degree and then get yourself in a position instead of washing out of the league and trying to go to Europe or whatever. Go back. So I did see a lot of players doing that, and I think it's a smart move, especially now with the uncertainty. Take it while you can. The NBA draft is still going to be there. I think they said that they're pushing it back or they're moving it up 5 days. So it's August 20th now, which is still super late if you're like a college guy. And I don't know if the rule is if you get drafted now that you can go back to college. I know they were talking about it, but even if that's the rule, I would assume most colleges have filled the transfer spots or your roster spots gone. Just because if the league's going to start back up and whatever, you're not going to be filling spots in September. You're just not, or whenever the draft actually is. So I hope that can get figured out, because I hate for players to just get screwed out of a chance. Same with the Major League, or not Major League Baseball, but with the NFL. Like, what's going to happen if some leagues get pushed back to the spring? Like the guys from the Ivy League. I know not a lot of Harvard guys or Yale guys get drafted, but there are some. are they going to be screwed now? Is it going to give them a better chance?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
So, I mean...
But I will say, I was seeing reports that they may be pushing the FCS or even some of the Division II schools may be playing spring football. And if they push the sport to the spring, I think that at a college level, you can get away with playing in the spring because you don't have as much player overlap. But what I'm curious to see is if they choose to do this and they go that route where they're going to go in the spring, then how fast of a turnaround is that, and what kind of wear and tear does that do going from the traditional fall sport that you're going to play however long into the spring / early part of summer, and then are you going to head right back to camp then if the issues with the pandemic have been released and we're able to go back to a traditional fall calendar? Because that would be a really quick turnaround, thinking logistically in terms of getting equipment reconditioned, in terms of getting stuff sent out and then returned to the team so that they're approved and ready to play. Like there's a lot of different factors that would go into it, that are separate versus high school, where if we were to move our football season from fall to spring, now you're interfering with kids that maybe run track or play baseball, that now you're taking athletes away from there that would cause bigger conflicts than to just keep it as is.
Well, the state of California, isn't that what they're doing?
That's what they're doing, but I'm curious to see how all that plays out, because when think about this, if you're a top prospect right now, you can still do non-sanctioned 7-on-7s and like AAU basketball and all this stuff. So how does that play out if you're a top recruit in the state and then you blow your knee out playing on your travel 7-on-7 team that technically is allowed to participate and do stuff right now? Like, I think it's has the potential to be a really messy situation.
Yeah, I think it's crazy. I don't know how it's going to be made consistent from like high school to college and then college to the pros, even in terms of like recruiting. So like, let's say you're a high school player. I know Michigan's in on a couple of California guys. Normally they do a re-rating like after the senior tape, like what happens for the recruiting rankings. I know it's a small thing, but for some fans, like they live or die by that. And some recruits, they rely on that to get that big offer. Like they might be a tweener right now booked at some smaller school, like let's say even App State right now, and they're hoping for the Tar Heels to come knocking on their door. And they're in California and they're pushed back to spring now. Tar Heels might be full. Signing days in February, they're going to push that back. I mean, like that's what I'm so confused on. Like, are they going to like put these guys in? God forbid a guy gets hurt. I know a lot of colleges, they can give him like a full scholarship or whatever, and it doesn't count against their football team. But if he gets hurt like in April, and you don't have time if signing day is already over to fill that spot,
well, here's
you have to hope for a
you.
transfer.
What about the guys that are able to sign early, and then they typically join their team in the spring? If you're bumping it to spring, you sign. Are you eligible then to play right off the smack with your college team? And that first, does that hurt your the number of years of eligibility, because it would be within the same calendar year? Or would they count that as two separate strikes against you?
Well, that's the hardball move. The past couple of years since they changed that, he's been having 5-7 dudes on campus in January. So, I mean, you recruit from a lot of private schools or whatever that make their own calendar. You have the luxury of having guys graduate early and get on campus if you really want them to and get that initial workout in. But to your point, like, why not? You have a stud freshman running back or someone come in, why not have them come in and get a couple of carries? And they have that rule where you can still play, 4 games? So you could technically have these guys just basically skip their senior season, come right in, and play.
hit some dingers on the recruiting trail. Hey, you can play right now. You will play or get 3 Maurice Clarets on your team, and there you go.
Yeah, what are you doing in 2 weeks? You want to play? Because I did think about this, and I think the only way you push back into the spring is if you're sure that they have a vaccine. Because it doesn't make sense, Matt, to push it back to January if you can't have a full stadium.
Well, the other thing that I was thinking about with this is that if they do, it's a bonus for guys like us that just enjoy watching games, and it doesn't matter what conference or who it is, you'll watch it because it's on. The things that it hurts are these startup leagues, like our XFL, AAF, even going way back when to the USFL or the whatever the other startup league, like whatever other startup leagues that there were, those are the ones that are going to be affected if they allow some of the college games to be played in the spring. And to be honest, the more that I think about it, I almost wouldn't mind, for as active as the transfer portal is, that to be able to offset like an FCS where they have some of those other levels playing in the spring that are able to accommodate that then you have the back and forth of the fall college football season in the spring, so the guys that are going to be transferring in and out, and may give guys some more opportunities to catch on to bigger programs.
And it's something that we won't know. I mean, the XFL, we don't even know if they're coming back. So there might not be another league. It might just end up being a benefit to fans that you get NFL in the fall and you get college football in the spring, and then you only get a couple months off, and it's right back to more football.
And if it's college that's coming into the spring, that's a nail in the coffin for the XFL, because there's no way that they can come back.
But
if they
who
have
knows if they're even going to come back
at the same time?
Why would you bring it back right now when you can't have fans in the stands? That was like part of their lifeblood. Like, you're better off, if you're the investor that buys them, you're better off maybe doing just a tournament like Major League Soccer did, or possibly just waiting until 2022.
I think financially, having college football there, I think that hurts the NBA playoffs. It hurts the startup of the Major League Baseball season. I really think that it would cause a logjam for a lot of other sports if they went that route. I mean, it would help the betting industry because there'd be a lot more to games to bet on and things to keep people interested. But I think that when you're looking at it as a professional team trying to make money, I think it would definitely hurt them if that were to come about.
And even that, it might not even be just those. It might even hurt the NCAA tournament, because they make a lot of big money on that opening weekend. And like, what if you have LSU Alabama that day? like what are you going to do? Or like any other game, like, you're hoping that it can pick up, but if your team's not in the Final Four, but they're playing in a big-time football game, what are you watching that Saturday? So, we'll see. I mean, they still pick up a bunch of numbers from sports bars and stuff, too, so I know that they report those numbers in the Nielsen ratings, because I heard one of the teams complaining about it with like, well, if bars start streaming, we're not going to get those numbers in our viewing numbers next TV deal. I forget what conference I saw talking about that. It was like, that's so random. Like, people might not even be watching it just because a bar has it on. You're trying to use that as advertising money anyway. So, but I have seen that. I don't think I really have anything else. Oh, lost my camera. I knew that was going to happen. Almost made it. You got anything else?
There was one last thing. I saw Devontae Freeman's looking for a home, and he signed with Drew Rosenhaus to try to get him onto a team. And I was just, as I saw that, I thought, well, there goes his chances of signing to Pittsburgh, because one thing Rosenhaus does is he seems to strong arm teams into getting the most money for his clients. So if you had any thoughts of trying to get Devontae Freeman into the black and gold, that ship has sailed.
Looking at their money that we talked about earlier, I don't even know what they can bring in terms of vets, especially if you're dealing with Rosenhaus.
They can't afford him. You just leave it at that. But I thought that he would have been a guy that would have been a really good pickup. That as a running back and with the stuff that he does in the passing game, I think he would fit perfectly and he would match well with Connor. But at this point, there's no way that they can make that work unless they really restructured Ben's contract and squeezed a couple nickels out of some hidden places.
Yeah, that's probably true. So we'll see how it shakes out, though. I wonder if they're going to redo some of the salary cap stuff. Because I saw the NBA pushing for it with like the shortened season and things like that. And if the NBA pushes for it, the NFL is going to push for it. You have the expanded rosters. Let's get some more guaranteed money for these extra practice squad guys or whatever they're trying to do. Doing one more double check, but I don't think I have anything else. You got anything else?
Nope. That's all I got for this week.
So we got some sports back with Major League Soccer, so check that out. Try to support anything, because I think if they start to get to support, then other leagues will definitely start to get extra support. And then we can go from there and hopefully have more. So tell your friends we're still doing our show. Hopefully we get some more sports back. We can pick things back up. But thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.